Hi, my name is Steve Hopkins. I'm the head coach with Jordan River Group, and I'm very happy to be bringing this message to you on video around inclusion, and specifically a couple of the most common failures in coaching the inclusion development process. I'm going to share a couple of those with you, and then also share a couple thoughts about the difference between teaching, the head part of this process, and coaching to outcome, and why that's applicable in this conversation. But first of all, I just want to share a thought with you about what we're really talking about here so we can stay focused. In all of the inclusion work that I've done, there's typically a couple of kinds of people, a couple of profiles that I end up working with. There's the people that don't really know how to action inclusion, how to engage in this work, and that is just a skill development opportunity. The other people are people that don't believe they need to engage in this, or they should engage in this work, and that's more of a will issue, if you were. But in either case, the two main failures are still the same. And so the first one, let's go into the first one. First one is really this confusion around diversity and inclusion. And remember, we're talking about inclusion, we're talking about the environment that allows us to have the sense of belonging, the idea that we want to be here. And you as a leader get to experience the benefits of that as well, looking around and seeing your team wanting to be there and be on your team. Diversity is just the makeup, the composition of the team, and certainly a valuable process and a valuable consideration, but just not to be confused with inclusion. Diversity comes at us in so many ways, and we've got obviously some very hot issues right now in the common ways we think about diversity, but here's a way that you can even promote the concept about the value of diversity in your workplace. And it looks like more like variety of personas, if you will. Take a simple self-assessment tool, bring it into your team, and just have them take a test. We use a test called Human Intelligence, and it's really a safe tool. It's not really focused on your strengths and weaknesses as much as it is just describing you as a person, your motivations, the way you communicate, your persona styles, and things like that. And it's a great tool to share. And what comes of that, besides just being better acquainted with yourself as a person and your work styles, is this celebration of the diversity within the team. You can share this with your whole team, and realizing that working alongside somebody that is a detail-oriented planner and a methodical decision maker, right alongside next to somebody who is creative and free-spirited and a little bit spontaneous, is a great mix. Like, sign me up for both those people on my team, to be honest with you. But the reality of that's diversity in play right away. And so the value of diversity in the team setting is pretty clear there. Well, that same celebratory profile can be exhibited in lots of different ways. And so it is valuable for sure. And we want to take that step and focus on diversity, but not to the extent that we confuse it with inclusion, which is really the beliefs and the behaviors that embody the ability to belong and be ourselves, and to be able to exclaim that we want to be here. So those two things getting confused is a big failure. Because if you put your focus on diversity hoping to get inclusion, you're going to find out that, in fact, your diversity initiatives have no longevity whatsoever. People will come into your organization as a diverse cohort, only to find out that they don't feel like they belong and they will leave. In fact, some may not come at all, because sometimes it's not that hard to see inclusion from afar, or exclusion. And so we don't want to get those two confused. The second one is a little more difficult, a little more complex, and let me share it with you. And this is just the concept that the traditional pattern approach that we have to create inclusion is flawed. And so let me take you through what most of us do. I'm guilty of this as well, in our focus in promoting inclusion in the workplace. And really what we're talking about is this trajectory of connecting thoughts in our head, the knowledge and the intellect side of things, and moving that all the way to the heart component, the belief system that then will fuel the hands part, the actions and the behaviors. And so it's really a head to heart to hands trajectory that we're hoping for. And that makes sense for sure. But let's dig into a little bit more of the tactics of it that most of us follow. When negative biases are exposed in the head component, we're going to break that down for a little bit, shedding some light on the awareness of what's going on and what really differences are and what the value of differences could be, then we feel like what typically happens as soon as that's exposed, people will naturally let go of those negative biases, those negative impulses towards difference. And the reality is that just doesn't happen. So let's take a deeper dive into this traditional process regarding differences and especially the negative biases associated with differences. When we're talking about that head part, remember, head to heart to hands, really that head part is focused on the steps of awareness and then the growth to understanding, and then that typically leads to a sense of appreciation. So we kind of go from just pondering awareness to learning and understanding more, which starts to have a personal contextualization in the appreciation area. We might start storytelling or thinking of ways to apply this to ourselves. And all this comes through really great teaching and exposure and knowledge. And again, I'm not saying this is wrong. I'm just saying it's not enough. So the thought that this teaching, the more we press into it, will be enough to cross over the threshold of conviction all the way to changing beliefs enough to fuel behaviors is a theory that just doesn't play out very often in the real world. And so in my experience, what usually happens is we enlist in this process and we go through workshops and read books and talk to important people and understand and become aware and do all of the head work. And then at that moment of difference, that moment of connection with another person, we right away start processing something a little bit different. And really what happens is we start trying to associate based on experiences. And the easy ones are, we're faced with a difference that we have a positive experience with in our past already. Well, that's the easy one. We've already banked a positive credit and we have a biased inclination that this is going to be positive as well. And so we forge forward, and those are easy things for us to model inclusion and behave in the way our heart and our mind hopes for and desires to. The other two options are not quite the same. The first one, obvious as well, that we've had a previous negative experience with a difference, with a profile of somebody different that resulted in pain or a negative experience or a bad outcome. And so what happens is we carry a negative bias about that past experience forward into this current one as well, because it looks similar. They sound the same. I know some things that are the same as that past experience I have. And so we carry that negative bias into the future, in the current experience. The third option is one that's a brand new experience, a difference that we've never met before. And oddly enough, we attach that same negative bias to our negative past experience one and lump all that together. Typically what happens is, for some reason, we get triggered with feeling threatened and fear. We then take counsel from that fear, we retreat, and we start behaving in exclusion. And the reason we do that is because the belief step has not been created yet. And so we're banking our teaching knowledge to carry us forward all the way through to inclusion behavior. And our belief system is being challenged at that moment, and we retreat. And I can tell you, this happens to me as well. I'm challenged by this all the time. The definition of difference for all of us at any given time rears up in all kinds of ways. And it's easy to say that we embrace difference and can model inclusion all the time, but quite frankly, I find the fact of the case be that it's just not true. I'm challenged, and I'll bet you are too. In fact, just this week I had an experience where I met somebody with Tourette's syndrome for the very first time in a personal level. And I had had some teaching and coaching from a friend of this person's before my meeting them to let me know a little bit more about the behaviors and a little more of the physiology of the disease and how this person had navigated some of this. And I grew actually appreciative and felt like I had a growing sense of understanding about this, and actually kind of was excited and looked forward to the meeting right up until the moment that I met this young lady. And then the difference factor kicked in for me, and I felt afraid. I felt insecure. I felt like I might do something wrong. I felt like I might show that I'm afraid and confused. I wanted to be safe, and I didn't feel safe. And I was tempted to retreat and react to that fear and ask to leave. Like, this just wasn't the kind of meeting that I thought I could go through. Isn't that interesting how that happens? And I was hoping that the thoughts in my head would translate easily to the behaviors of my hands. And it was a lot more challenging than I thought. So I think there's a better way. And like I said, the teaching that we do around inclusion is not wrong and shouldn't be omitted, but I just don't think it's enough. In my experience with a better way, I'd like to share with you. It's kind of like this. It's kind of like going to the gym 5 days in a row and only working on our arms and shoulders. I think we'd be disappointed after a year or so that we have no development or flexibility or strength that we've gained in our legs to match. You can come up with lots of analogies about that. And so that sets me up to share this with you, that in our voyage of the head component of awareness to understanding to appreciation in that trajectory towards the conviction of belief change, that we can work the equation from the other side at the exact same time. And the other side of that equation is starting with behavior, working towards belief. And it's amazing, the benefits and the element components that behavior adds to this mix is totally different than the teaching components for the head knowledge. And when we work on both of those simultaneously, and I'll call it this tagline, behave until you believe, that we speed up the process, we add those necessary elements faster in the equation to benefit moving towards belief and the inflection moment of conviction of heart change that will fuel behavior going forward as well. And really, we're playing with a couple different levers with behavior. We're playing with the lever of modeling and the lever of accountability. And to be honest with you, that's where this coaching concept comes in, is that behavior takes action, behavior takes practice, behavior takes reflection and accountability and check-in so that we can move practice behavior to performance. The natural act of behaving this whole way to be accurately reflecting the heart change that's happened by pressing the two sides of the equation together. I think we have a slide that we've kind of shown this as we've been talking. And that's how we get the successful result that we're looking for, through engagement and interaction and sharing with another person, co-creating together actions and specific practice activities to grow the muscles throughout our whole body that reflect our heart, of which our mind has been fueling and making ready for the change, and getting away from the transactional thought process of compliance all the way to what I would label as fairly clear informal segregation. I mean, what I wanted to do that day in my meeting was leave the room, segregate myself from her, and her just being a profile of a different person than me, but instead leaning in and saying, I'm not comfortable with this yet. It's not natural yet. I can't just snap my fingers and do it, but I'm going to practice the behaviors that model inclusion until I get there, while I'm also working on the head part. And that's where coaching comes in. And so I just want to share this video with you to encourage you that maybe the new way is working on behaviors at the same time we're working on teaching and knowledge. Squeeze the equation towards belief change and conviction change at the same time. And I've experienced by myself and many others that this is a way for faster progress, more fruitful growth experience, and a more abundant team growth reflection as well. I hope this has been valuable for you. Feel free to follow up with any questions you have on this whole process or ways to action it specifically for you and your team. And I'll look forward to seeing you on the other side of the river.